Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Last week in Oklahoma, the state tortured a convicted murderer to death with an oaky, strange brew of lethal injection, which burst his veins, leaving him writhing and gasping in pain for 40 minutes until he finally died of a heart attack. As no European surrender monkey will send America a well-manufactured chemical of death, Americans have turned to making their own medieval version. But with adversity comes opportunity. This could be a huge growth industry for the prison industrial complex in America, manufacturing more intimate, more gruesome instruments of death. Stacy?
Max, I'm going to start with this headline, 25 most brutal torture techniques ever devised. Now, this is the whole basis of, the Disney Corporation's whole big enterprise is taking medieval sort of fairy tales and turning them into copyrighted modern stories. So I thought we could maybe patent these old versions with a new twist. The first one, the tub. Known as the punishment of sitting in the tub, the convicted person would be placed in a wooden tub with only their head sticking out. After that, the executioner would paint their faces with milk and honey, and soon flies would begin to feed on them. The victim was also fed regularly and would end up swimming in their own excrement. After a few days, maggots and worms would devour their body as they decayed. For me, this sounds a lot like the U.S. economy and the jobs market. This is like the torture, the ongoing torture of the U.S. worker.
Well, it does speak to a certain stagnation. The U.S. economy is fairly stagnant. It's kept kind of optically looking attractive by misquoting economic numbers that are manufactured and smeared all over the mass media. To hide the fact that they're being hollowed out from within by maggots. I would present to you Maria Bartiromo as a good example of a hollowed out, maggot-strewn liar over there on Fox Business. So I can see the analogy there.
I have another analogy and an ancient method of torture, and this is very similar to U.S. monetary policy, and it's called the lead sprinkler. Usually filled with molten lead, tar, boiling water, or boiling oil, it was used to torture victims by dripping the contents onto their stomach or other parts of their body, like the eyes. Using this device, the torturer would proceed to pour molten silver on the victim's eyes, which resulted in agonizing pain and eventual death.
Well, it gives a new twist to this whole idea of waterboarding. Waterboarding, just water, simulated drowning. You get up, dancing around, you're ready to go. Here you're pouring molten lead or silver on people's eyeballs. I mean, this is when men were men. This is really the old medieval days. But I think that bringing these back in America would be commensurate with their slide back into medievalism and the whole idea of drawing the drawbridge. We've got all the money. You all live in a wasteland. Nothing's out there. And when we catch up with you, we're going to torture you to death. So it's not enough to just have a Guantanamo Bay where people are starving to death. You need to torture them in these medieval ways. Yeah, I agree. Get Disney to do a pay-per-view. This would be great. They own ABC, have a pay-per-view media event, torture innocent people by pouring hot silver on their eyeballs, and get Mickey Mouse to do a little dance with Minnie Mouse.
Now, I was going to use as the third one, Vlad the Impaler's, the Impaler. And the reason why I didn't is it used to take 3 days for the average person to sink down through the impaling device. But now I think they would just fall too fast. They would just go straight down. So it wouldn't be as much fun. So the third and final one is, for me, analogous to Wall Street markets. And it's called the Brazen Bull. Also known as the Sicilian bull, it was designed in ancient Greece. A solid piece of brass was cast with a door on the side that could be opened and latched. The victim would be placed inside the bull and fire set underneath it until the metal became literally yellow as it was heated. The victim would then be slowly roasted to death, all while screaming in agonizing pain. The bull was purposely designed to amplify these screams and make them sound like the bellowing of a bull.
Well, yeah, I mean, to follow up on this, and the chemicals now used to put people to death on death row are being substituted with a home brew, a cocktail of what you could imagine people who are addicted to this new crocodile drug, where they're taking all kinds of fluids, lighter fluids, and gasoline and heroin and whatever else they can find, and then they inject it and they become crocodile-ified, where their veins start popping out and it's a slow, gruesome death. So America, figuring that, hey, you're not going to spend the extra $5. Remember, this is what happened at 9/11. They didn't want to spend $5 for locks between the cockpit and the rest of the cabin, so they blew themselves up. Here, they don't want to spend $5 extra on, legitimate death chemicals, so they're using homebrew. They're going to do it all at home, eat a little of this, a little of that, and do it that way. And you get the medieval torture, which is now going to be a leading U.S. Showcase for torture.
Well, part of the reason with the chemicals that normally are used to execute people, they're manufactured by Europeans. And Europeans realize that the only use for them now are Americans killing other people, and they won't allow them to be used to execute people. So they're not refusing to execute, to send them to America.
So it's like sanctions.
Yes.
So Europeans are sanctioning America they've already been through the medieval torture years.
Yeah.
They're trying to say, wait a minute, America, we don't want you torturing people. We've already done it. It's not pretty. And America's like, no, give us those chemicals. They're sanctioning. That's the way you want a sanction to work. You want sanctions, Europe to America, don't send torture chemicals. That's a good sanction.
So going back to this brazen bull and why I was saying it's analogous to Wall Street, inside this device is a human being. Just like down on Wall Street, there is a giant bull, and inside there, the wealth of the nation, the wealth of all these chump investors and these passive investors, these pension funds, and they're actually screaming, but to the markets, to the world, and certainly to Maria Bartiromo and all of the financial media, it sounds like a bellowing bull that is like, yeah, it's all great, but actually it's our wealth being tortured inside the brazen bull that is Wall Street.
Well, the stock market in America has flipped over, and it's accomplishing something that it wasn't set out to do. Originally, it was set out to distribute shares in companies that were growing, and this is the way to enfranchise the average guy with a stake in the growth of the country. And then Merrill Lynch and the Thundering Herd was out there, and stockbrokers, and buy IBM and buy AT&T. But starting, under Reagan and becoming more pronounced recently, the stock market is now a funding vehicle for kleptocrats and torturers. So every time the Dow Jones hit a new high, as it's done recently, that just means that guys who like to torture people in prison for a living and to kill them spuriously for their jollies, they just got another big payday to go out there and torture folks. So when the average guy sees the Dow Jones hitting new highs, they're like cowering in fear because the kleptocrats just got another huge infusion of torture money.
And on the other side, my position is that the bellowing, the record highs, is actually tortured humans, the 330 million Americans that aren't the top 0.1%. These are people being front run and squeezed and nickel and dime to death in the markets. And in fact, that brings me to this headline of Another Way to Die by this brazen bull. SEC Chair to Congress, the markets are not rigged. U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Mary Jo White flatly rejected claims that retail investors are being fleeced by high-frequency traders who can use their speed to jump ahead with buy and sell orders that fetch better prices. She said the markets are not rigged and, quote, the U.S. markets are the strongest and most reliable in the world.
Well, we said on this show that this would be her response. You can write Mary Jo's script months in advance. It's written by the high-frequency traders. They give her a script. She reads the script. I guess she's testifying before Congress. So I believe that's a criminal offense when you knowingly lie in front of Congress. I think, don't you have to do like a swearing in? Like maybe it's just an informal discussion, but if it's an actual swearing in, then she committed perjury. She's lied, and she's furthered the demise of these capital markets because they are providing false price signals, and those false price signals are the information gathering device used by the current administration to launch things like, invasions in various countries or economic policies that are causing wide-scale poverty.
Well, she was just stating her opinion, and she also went on to say that these are not illegal acts anyway. To use a high-frequency algorithm trading bot is not illegal.
That's false. Put this in a context. If I go to your neighbor and I stick a hose into the gas tank of your neighbor's car, and I siphon gasoline from that car, and I run away with it, okay? I can't say I'm making a market. I can't say I'm providing liquidity. I've stolen the gas from the car. If you stick a high-frequency trading co-located computer next to the floor of the exchange with the sole purpose of draining cash from the exchange, that's stealing. I mean, she's way out of her league. She's out of her depth. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And not only that, but she's lying.
Well, I'm saying that, for example, it's against the law to murder, right? That's in the code books of the United States. And yet they murdered a man in Oklahoma. Why is that that's technically illegal, right? But no, not if the state says it. Here, the state is saying it is legal for our guys to front run our pension funds. Yes, they can do it. So this is like the Brazen Bull. The Brazen Bull was a gruesome thing. There was a man inside there being melted to death and screaming, and this was considered legal. This is what she's saying, is the high-frequency trading is legal in her opinion and in the opinion of the Department of Justice, because if it were not legal, they would have arrested them.
Okay, there's two sets of laws. I mean, one set of laws for the government, which is in bed with the banks who are perpetrating these crimes, and under their set of laws, they claim it's legal. But I think what Mary Jo is saying is that technically a front-running high-frequency trading operation is what Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs calls a market-making activity. If that's her claim, and I believe it is, in my opinion, that's her claim, then I would like to disabuse her of that false information, Mary Jo. You are false, and by extension, you're lying through the teeth, and you're defrauding yourself and the American and Wall Street for what? Is it just the money, Mary Jo? Is it just the money?
Well, she says also that the markets in America are the most reliable in the world, and I wanted to point out that those in Oklahoma who made that strange brew, the home brew of the cocktail of death, well, they said it was also reliable and wouldn't allow anybody to look at the ingredients. They just said, just trust us. It's perfect. It's the best ever. And just like what she's saying about the U.S. markets. And finally, here's another way to torture yourself to death in America, and it's called Obamacare cluster medical homelessness in California. While open enrollment for coverage under the Affordable Care Act is closed, many of the newly insured are finding they cannot find doctors, landing them into a state described as medical homelessness. One of the doctors who is observing all this data in California in particular, they're talking about, well, insurance coverage is a necessary but not sufficient condition to assure that people get access to care when they need it. So that's a medical death, but also financial death. This is part of that brazen bull sucking all your wealth away, but not giving you anything in return.
Right. According to Mary Jo's logic, this is working great. They got the insurance money. They go to the doctor doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean that they're not getting good health service. According to the illogic of somebody who's strictly looking at the hello, money under the table, Mary Jo, what did it cost for this lie, baby? But, you know, going back to that earlier idea of is it market making or is it just stealing, I think, you know, the fluid that they use to kill people in America now is probably the same as the fracking fluid, because remember, the fracking fluid is also protected as a trade secret, and they won't let anyone know what's in the fracking fluid. I think it's the same fluid. So people are being fracked to death. That's
Yes.
the new way the state punishes you. They stick a hose in your schwing, and they frack you to death. Wow. And 9 times out of 10, they look at the DNA later, and they find out the guy was innocent. But we extracted the methane from his rotting corpse to power our smart cars. So it was good. Thank you, Obama. Anyway, Stacey, we got to go. Thanks so much.
I'll see you in the Brazen Bull.
Looking forward to it. Stay tuned for the second half, a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Reggie Middleton of BoomBustBlog.com, who is launching Reggie Middleton's Ultra Coin. Reggie, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Well, thank you very much. And as usual, I'm glad to be back, especially this time. But
all right, Reggie, on this show, we were the first to talk about Bitcoin several years ago. We were the first to talk about Litecoin. We were the first to talk about Ethereum. Now today, we're going to break something new from Reggie Middleton, an exclusive on the Keiser Report. Take it away.
Okay, well, I have something I've been more excited about than any venture, entrepreneur or otherwise, that I've ever encountered in my life. I've created an invention. I've created this. What I've created was, or my team and I've created, was a wallet that in itself allows each and every person to become their own investment bank, commercial bank, exchange, stock exchange, bond exchange, etc., and lender. Basically, through this personal wallet, you now have loans without banks, trades without exchanges, contracts without lawyers. This is phenomenal, and as you may know, this is a direct threat to the hegemony that stands as a middleman that fails to add value. It is disruption to the nth degree. And I want to announce it on the Max Keiser show. What this does, the 3 elements, basically. The first element is it eliminates the need to trust any other counterparty in the transaction. The lack of trust is like a tax or a cost on the transaction. Most of the time you do business, you have to reserve or insure against this lack of trust. So if you do a deal where you buy a house, you have to escrow funds, you have to get lawyers, you have to potentially go to court. This invention, built upon the Bitcoin protocol, eliminates that. It also allows you to do financial and value transactions without a middleman. So instead of going to an exchange where you give your assets to an exchange and exchange matches you up with someone else, you now keep your assets, your money, in your pocket, in your wallet, and you exchange directly with others through the help of a middleman that has no control over your assets. You keep the keys to your own lock, okay? And third, this is done 24 hours a day, 360 days a week. The Bitcoin has been, through Mark Andreessen, through myself, and through many other visionaries, compared to the internet in 1993. Okay, I'd like to take that comparison one step further. When the internet first became popularized and companies who didn't understand the power of the internet attempted to use it, they did things such as you had newspapers who would literally take a picture of their physical newspaper and post it on the web page, and they thought that was embracing innovation. What they did was they wasted the power and they squandered the ability of this new invention, this new ability. And then you had the true visionaries who came behind it. And what they did was they took the media and they embraced the actual abilities of the internet. This is what created YouTube. Now think about taking a picture of the New York Times and putting it on a web page versus YouTube.
All right,
Twitter,
Reggie, let me jump in
Facebook.
here for a second. Let me jump in, okay? So let's talk about this. So I take it that the enterprise is called UltraCoin, as you've described it. You're saying that it's revolutionary, it's going to be disruptive in a way that we haven't seen anything yet in the finance space. So here's a couple of questions. Number one, what you're describing there sounds like you're basing some businesses around what's already present on the blockchain of the Bitcoin, and we already have a company called the Ethereum Project, which is doing something that is similar. They were on the show a couple of weeks ago. The way that they described the Ethereum Project is similar to what you're describing as UltraCoin. So my first question is, how is this different than the Ethereum Project?
Okay, well, Ethereum is basically consisting of a bunch of geniuses. I have a lot of respect for those guys. What they're doing is they're creating a programming language that allows you to build tools to trade value. Okay, so they're a programming language and a platform. Think of Ethereum as C++. And what I'm doing is I'm taking an actual product usable by the end user, directly usable by the end user, to make contracts, trades for value, etc. So think of Ethereum as C++, and think of UltraCoin, Reggie Middleton's UltraCoin, as Twitter or as Microsoft Office, something that could be used immediately to transact value that's based upon the platform. And that platform is and currently is Bitcoin, but can be Ethereum or anything else. So
okay, let me ask you this.
Difference.
Let's jump into the business side of this business for a second. So Reggie Middleton's UltraCoin, where do you sit in the enterprise? You're taking some kind of fees somewhere. You're licensing the technology. How does UltraCoin make money in this, if they didn't make money at all?
What UltraCoin does is it takes a very, very small amount in terms of basis points of the transaction when it's done between two entities. The transaction is peer-to-peer. In other words, you have full control of your money until you give it up. You design the contract, okay, that interacts with the other party. And what UltraCoin does, it assists the two parties in getting together and takes a very, very small fee. A fee that is so small that it collapses the business models of several different industries. Investment banking, brokerage, insurance, merchant banking, etc. The fee is nominal, and the fee actually goes down with volume. Now, the issue with the business models and where UltraCoin fits in and how it profits is, or what's inventive or what's innovative about it is, I've decided to take the ability of Bitcoin and build a business from scratch. And I think what's going wrong, most people are playing with Bitcoin the little Bitcoins, the lowercase b, the coins, and they're not actually doing business with the actual protocol, which is the enabling technology. So I've decided to take businesses and not take a legacy business and force it into a box and put Bitcoin on it. I've decided to take legacy businesses, disassemble them, and rebuild them on the Bitcoin protocol. And that is the enabling portion of it. That is what enables me to create new businesses that didn't exist before and new abilities.
So let me ask you, the Bitcoin itself, or cryptocurrencies, they are, of course, extremely exciting for a whole new wave of developers. I understand your whole development team watches the Keiser report,
yes,
which, of course, is the first step toward liberation from the current status quo. So a big shout out to the team. But the question is, the regulatory wall that Bitcoin is running into, because the regulatory framework right now and the regulators in the US and the UK around the world are obviously going to be favoring the status quo and the powers that be who don't like any competition, don't like the challenge. So there's a couple of ways that they are attempting to shut down the competition. They go after the exchanges, for example, or they go after, they make scapegoats out of entrepreneurs in the U.S., like we're seeing with Charlie Shrem. In other words, they are proactively going after cryptocurrencies because they don't like the competition. What is your plan going forward to either A, deal with the regulators, or B, is your plan just to be so fantastic that it's just going to redefine the space and to hell with the regulators? Reggie Middleton.
Well, I like to do C, which is a combination of A plus B. The regulators are reacting. And I'm going to be straightforward, so no disrespect to regulators. I actually want to work with you. But the regulators are acting out of a lack of knowledge. I want to say ignorance, but that's a word that has a certain connotation. A lack of knowledge combined with what's reported in the media. From a regulatory perspective, using a product such as UltraCoin is multiples safer than conducting business through a bank. From a regulatory perspective, regulators can still collect taxes if they wish, still participate in revenues, and it is much, much safer for the end user. What is reported in the media is often not very close to the fact. For a perfect example is Mt. Gox and the collapse of Mt. Gox. What Mt. Gox did was it played with Bitcoins, the little case B. It did nothing in terms of taking advantage of Bitcoin, the protocol. What Mt. Gox did was it took Bitcoins from end users and it just transferred them back and forth or held them. Mt. Gox was the escrow agent, the brokerage, and the transfer agent. And so when Mt. Gox went down, everything went down. By using the Bitcoin protocol, you allow everybody to maintain control of their coins until they decide to let them go, and to avoid trusting the third party, which was Mt. Gox or Lehman Brothers or Man Financial or Bear Stearns.
So Mt. Gox is an early casualty of this revolution, and during every technological revolution, you could look at the internet itself, there are many losers, but a few mega winners, like Google, like Twitter, like eBay, like Amazon.
And Reggie, also, let me interrupt. Mt. Gox was a victim of poor management. Mt. Gox's fall had nothing to do with Bitcoin. It had to do with poor execution. Okay,
fair enough. But in the minutes we have remaining, I wanted to touch base because before you became Reggie Middleton's UltraCoin, going back as recently as last year, you were known really throughout the world as a stock picker. You won 2 straight stock picking contests in a row over there at CNBC. I think you picked Google for 2 years in a row, and it trounced all the competition. It did phenomenally well. So you have your ear to Wall Street. You know about these stocks. You're a technology entrepreneur and trader. So I want to talk about Twitter. Twitter's stock, it just had a massive tumble. Where is Twitter, as a stock? What are your thoughts on that? Also, Google is buying high-powered, solar-powered drones. What are your thoughts about that, Reggie?
Well, Twitter is a pure play on management execution. What Twitter is a technology that does not have a strong barrier to entry, but is enabling. But due to the network effect, Twitter is used that particular type of technology is used more than any of its potential competition. So there's a natural barrier to entry, which is a network effect, but it's also potentially fleeting. Twitter's success is almost a pure play on management execution.
It sounds like you're pretty constructive about Twitter, and this pullback might be a buying opportunity. What do you make of Google buying these solar-powered drones? What's that all about?
Well, again, I don't know Google's business model, but if you take a look, what I did when I analyzed Google, one of the reasons why I recommend it for my subscribers, if you take a look at Google's return on investment of acquisitions, it is outrageous. They outperform almost all the major venture capital firms. You take a look at Android, you take a look at YouTube, you take a look at Grand Central, which is now Google Voice, Google Docs, etc. You take a look at how much they paid for it, how much money and resources they put into it, and then what the market value and or revenue stream is now, and you see that Google really, really knows what it's doing. The solar-powered drones, looks like Google's working on something outrageous, disruptive in a way that takes advantage of the inefficiencies that are currently in place. I don't know what it is, but if I had a choice of betting binary option, betting for Google or against Google, it would be Google all the way, particularly considering their track record.
All right, good enough, Reggie. We're out of time. Thanks so much. Those are excellent points. Thanks again for being on the Keiser Report.
You're very, very welcome. Look forward to being back.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Reggie Middleton of BoomBossBlog.com. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.